the four horsemen of the atheist apocalypse, that being Dawkins and Dennett and Harris and Hitchens, certainly adopt that view that evolution and other aspects of science render faith no longer necessary, and more than that, that religion has been the root of all evil and is not just sort of a stupid idea, it is actually a dangerous concept that ought to be eradicated from humanity as quickly as possible. That is an extremist perspective. They are fundamentalists in a different sort of way than we use the term. And they are committing a logical fallacy that is actually very obvious when you look at it, but oftentimes not admitted to. Namely, taking the arguments from science and trying to say, those prove there is no God. If God has any meaning, God is not entirely enclosed within nature. Science really only has the ability to make comments about anything if those are things within nature. That's what science is all about. And so to use the tools of science to comment on God's existence is a category error. Stephen Jay Gould made that point very clearly, even though he was not a believer and even though he thought science and faith ought to be kept separate and not allowed to touch each other. He was very clear on this issue, that scientists were making a profound logical error and a dangerous and unfortunate one to try to use science to comment on God's existence. Yet that particular form of fundamentalism, scientism, evolutionism, translated into atheism, makes that mistake over and over again. On the other extreme, we have other kinds of fundamentalists, particularly, I think, in the most extreme version, the young earth creationists. Those, for instance, like a Ken Ham, who puts together a creation museum outside of Cincinnati that depicts humans and dinosaurs frolicking together in a way that is absolutely impossible to support by even a cursory look at the data, and who see themselves as being on some sort of mission from God to try to continue to propose these concepts to young people who are not in a good position oftentimes to know what it is that they're being sold and just how flawed the arguments are. And that is doing great damage as well, because those young people grow up and they go to university and they finally get a chance to see the evidence and they realize they've been lied to. And then they begin to wonder, well, what about the rest of this? If this business about the age of the earth is not what I was taught in Sunday school, what about this business about Jesus Christ? What about the resurrection? What about salvation? And many of those people write to me in great crisis, wondering, is there any way to save their faith from destruction when they've realized how many cracks are in the foundation that they had been asked to build? These extremisms do great harm, and yet they have been the voices that you've primarily heard. And the idea that there is actually a comfortable, intellectually supportable, spiritually satisfying middle ground is often a pretty well-kept secret.